I was only 12 when I stopped being a child. That was the year I learned that monsters don't hide under the bed, they sit at the family table and wear kind smiles in front of neighbors. My monster had a name, Walter Johnson. My father. To the outside world, he was a fine man, respected, generous, always the first to lend a hand or say grace at Sunday dinner. But behind closed doors, he became something else entirely. Now, I'm 83. A whole lifetime away from that 12-year-old girl with braids and quiet eyes. But some memories, they cling like the scent of molasses in an old general store, sweet, thick, and impossible to shake. I live in Savannah now. A quiet little house with creaky porch steps and a rocking chair that fits me just right. My hands, speckled and veined from years of work, still remember every jar of flour I carried. Every night I didn't sleep, but they also remember planting flowers, holding babies, building a home out of nothing but grit and prayer. I don't tell this story often. In fact, it's taken me over 60 years to find the breath to let it out. But today, I'm ready. Not because I want pity, and not because I'm brave, just because silence has protected the wrong people for too long. So pull up a chair. Sweetheart, I'll tell you everything. And maybe, just maybe, you'll see that even in the deepest dark, there's a flicker of light worth chasing. Before I go on, can I ask you something real gentle? If you're still here listening, maybe tell me where you're watching from. Are you somewhere quiet? Like I am. Or maybe on the move? With the world buzzing around you, it warms this old heart to imagine someone out there, someone I'll never meet, hearing a story I held close for so long. You can write it in the comments. Just a little hello from wherever you are. And if this beginning stirs something in you, well, go ahead and hit that subscribe button for Tenacity Tales. That way you won't miss the rest of this journey, because I promise, child, it's only just begun. Back then, Millbrook wasn't even a speck on the big maps. Just red clay roads that turned to rivers of mud when it rained. Wooden houses painted in colors that chipped in the summer sun. And church bells that rang every Sunday whether your soul was clean or not. Ours was the white house behind the general store, the one with the blue shutters and the clothesline that never seemed empty. The store sat right on the corner of Main Street. Johnson's General Store. Painted sky blue. Letters in bold black across the top, like it was something proud. And it was. To everyone in town, it was a place of trust. You needed flour, a hammer, kerosene, or news, that's where you went. And you'd be greeted by my father, Mr. Walter Johnson, with his pressed shirt, slick back hair, and that smile wide and white as a picket fence. He knew everyone by name. He'd ask about your crops, your sick mother, your boy off at war. Folks came to buy, sure, but mostly they came to talk. He listened well, nodded kindly, gave credit, even when he shouldn't. To the town, he was a pillar, a man of God. They tipped their hats and said that there's a good man, and for the longest time, I believed them. Mama's name was Mary. Folks in town used to say she had the kind of beauty that made men forget what they were doing. Soft skin like milk, hair the color of honey in the sunlight, and eyes, the palest blue I've ever seen. Same as mine. I inherited them from her. But while mine have turned sharp from all they've seen, hers just faded. Little by little. Like a flame running out of air. I don't remember Mama laughing much. Not even in my earliest memories. Maybe once, when I was 4 and spilled flour everywhere trying to help her bake. She smiled then. That soft, fleeting kind of smile that makes you think spring might really come again. But most of the time, she was quiet, fragile, a ghost moving through the house in her nightgown, smelling faintly of lavender and the bitter medicine the town doctor prescribed. They called it nerves. Sighed she had delicate sensibilities. Needed rest and quiet. But I know now it was depression. The deep kind. The kind that sinks into your bones and won't let you up. Some days she couldn't get out of bed. Other days, she sat by the window for hours, just staring at nothing. Like her mind had gone someplace far away. When she was well enough, she'd hum hymns and bake chess pie. The whole house would fill with that buttery sweet smell. And for a little while, we were almost a real family. I lived for those days. Then came Betty 2 years after me. A quiet little thing, always clinging to the hem of my dress. She had eyes too big for her face and a heart too soft for this world. She didn't talk much. She watched, listened, felt everything. Even as a toddler, she could sense moods in a room like animals do before storms. If I cried, she'd crawl into my lap without a word and just sit there, like she knew that sometimes silence heals more than speaking ever could. And then there was Sarah, 7 years younger than me, born when Mama was already so sick. We weren't even sure she'd make it through the pregnancy. But Sarah came into the world loud and full of life. A big baby with rosy cheeks and curly dark hair, always reaching for the light. As soon as she could walk, she'd skip through the house singing made-up songs about clouds and stars and chickens. She was laughter in a home that had forgotten how to laugh. She could get a smile out of Daddy, even him. And Lord knows that was rare. Betty and I adored her. We called her our sunshine and meant it with everything in us. She was our purpose, our reason to keep going. From the day she was born, I made myself a promise, whatever happens. I'll protect her. I won't let him touch her. Not her. But that came later. Back then, we were just 3 little girls in a house that looked normal from the outside. A mother who floated like mist, a father who smiled for the town and sneered behind closed doors, and us trying to play like other children did, while always listening, always watching, always bracing for the shift in the air. We had our own little world. The 3 of us, Betty and I, used to make up stories at night. Lying side by side in bed, we'd whisper about faraway lands where no one got hurt and girls had wings. Sarah would fall asleep between us, her thumb in her mouth. Safe for now. Sometimes I wonder how we managed to laugh at all. But children do that, don't they? They find joy in the cracks. Even when the foundation is rotting beneath them, there are some things you only understand in hindsight. Back then, I didn't have the words for it. All I knew was that something felt off, wrong. It started small. I was about 11 when Daddy began calling me to stay behind after the store closed. "Ellie knows the books," he'd say, waving off Mr. Gerald and the others. "She'll help me lock up." I liked the attention. At first, it felt like a compliment. He said I had a good head for numbers. Better than most boys my age. He'd pat my shoulder and say, "Smart girl. Sharp like your daddy." I'd stay after hours, standing on the stool behind the counter, scribbling figures into the ledgers while the warm golden light from the window faded into gray. The store would grow quiet, too quiet. Only the tick of the wall clock and the faint rustle of paper. He'd sit nearby, watching, always watching. Sometimes he'd talk too softly, or stand too close. But I didn't think much of it, at least not then. I just knew my chest felt tight sometimes, like I'd forgotten how to breathe. Then came the compliments. About my hair, my legs, the way I was growing into a woman. It made me squirm. But he was my father. And when you're 11, you still believe your father knows everything. That he must be right. That the wrong feeling in your stomach is your fault, not his. I remember one day clear as glass. I was reaching for a box on the high shelf, standing on that wobbly old stool, when I felt his hand on my waist. "Careful now," he said, but the hand didn't move. It stayed. Then it slid just a little, but enough to freeze me in place. I didn't know what to say, didn't know what it meant, only that my legs started to shake and the back of my neck burned like fire. When I climbed down, he smiled. Not like a father. Not like anyone should smile at a child. After that, I started noticing the way he looked at me when Mama was in bed, the way his voice softened only when we were alone. And I began to feel what I didn't yet understand, that the air around him was changing, and it was closing in. I was 12 the day the world stopped being safe. 12. Still a child. Still believed that if I was quiet and good and helpful, life might be kind. It was late afternoon. The shop had just closed, and the sun poured through the windows in golden strips. I remember the smell, the bitter coffee grounds, the sweet molasses, the kerosene in the corner, scents that still twist my stomach when I catch them in the wind. Mama was in bed. As always. Betty had gone to fetch water. Sarah was napping. It was just him and me in the store. He sat on the tall stool behind the counter, flipping through the ledger. "Come here, daughter," he said, patting his lap. "Sit with Daddy a while." Something in me paused. I wasn't a baby anymore, I knew that. But disobeying Daddy wasn't an option. You didn't say no to him. Ever. So I walked over, knees a little stiff, and climbed onto his lap. The chair creaked under our weight. He smelled like sweat and something sharp bourbon, though I didn't know the name for it yet. At first, it was just his arm around me. Then his hand began to move. Slow, deliberate, up my thigh, across my belly, higher. I froze. I didn't cry, didn't scream. Just sat there like a doll someone had forgotten how to love properly. When I tried to shift away, his hand gripped my waist, so hard I gasped. He leaned close, breath hot and sour in my ear. "You listen here, girl," he whispered. "You tell anyone, especially your mama, and she'll have a spell so bad it might kill her. You want that on your head." I didn't speak. I couldn't. I just nodded. After a few more moments, he let me go. I slid off his lap, legs like water, and walked home without saying goodbye. The world looked the same, but it wasn't. That night, I locked myself in the bathroom, turned on the faucet so no one would hear me sob. I filled the tub with scalding water, climbed in fully clothed, and scrubbed my skin until it burned. But no matter how hard I rubbed, I couldn't get him off me. Not really. I didn't eat, didn't sleep, didn't speak to Betty. Even when she asked, I just lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, waiting for something, anything to make me feel clean again. The next morning, I tried to tell Mama. She was having one of her better days, sitting at the table, peeling apples. I sat across from her and whispered what had happened. Not all of it. I didn't have the words. Just enough. Enough for her to know. She went still. Then she blinked. I looked at me like I'd just said the sky was purple. And in that moment, I saw it, fear. Not of me. Of him. Don't make up stories. "Ellie," she said, "your father's a good man. We're lucky to have him. You know how many women around here wish they had what we do." She never looked up again. And just like that, I knew no one was coming. No one was going to save me. I didn't give up right away. That first time didn't destroy me, not yet. It rattled me, left me cold and hollow inside. But somewhere deep in that 12-year-old girl was still a flicker of belief someone would help me. Someone had to. I tried Mama again. A few days later, When she was having another good day, she was sitting on the porch, brushing Sarah's curls, humming something soft. I sat at her feet, took a deep breath, told her again. This time, I used more words. Words that felt jagged in my mouth. Words I barely understood. But she did. She understood. And she flinched. Her hand stopped mid-brush. Her eyes clouded. Distant. Like she'd gone somewhere else. Then silence. A silence so loud it screamed. She set the brush down, picked Sarah up, and walked inside. Didn't say a word. Didn't look at me. That was when I stopped trying with her. So I turned to someone I thought had to help Miss Jane Fowler, my Sunday school teacher. Gently voice. Cross on her necklace. Always said, God sees all. Child. She was restocking hymn books when I pulled her aside. I trembled the whole time. Told her something was wrong. That I didn't feel safe at home. That my daddy touches me in ways that don't feel right. She looked at me like I'd spit in the sanctuary. Pulled back. Lips pressed tight. Now listen. Child. She said. We don't bring such talk into God's house. Then softer. Your daddy is a pillar of this community. You must have misunderstood. She handed me a Bible. Told me to pray. I did. That night. But nothing happened. Then came Reverend Collins, the one who baptized me. I waited until no one was around after service. Cornered him behind the church steps. He listened. Expression flat. Then said, Sometimes the devil tempts young girls to lie, even to themselves. He told me to confess and ask forgiveness. I felt dirtier walking away from him than I ever did walking away from my father. Last, I tried my grandmother, Mama's Mama. She lived up the road, in a little white house that smelled like lemon and mothballs. I snuck away one Saturday and told her everything. She sat stiff in her rocking chair. Didn't blink once. When I was done, she said, Well, that's awful. Then she stood, walked to her kitchen, started slicing potatoes. She never spoke of it again. That's when I understood something I wish I hadn't. Some truths are too ugly for people to hold. So they drop them. And the weight stays with you. Only you. I don't remember the exact day. Just that it was summer humid. Slow. Heavy with heat and dread. Betty had gone with Daddy to the store. Just like I used to. I stayed behind with Sarah. We picked wildflowers in the backyard. She was singing again something about bumblebees and buttons, and I kept pretending to smile. But my stomach wouldn't stop turning. Something was wrong. I didn't know how. But I knew. They were gone for hours. When they came back, Daddy whistled like nothing had happened. Betty walked behind him. Silent. Staring at the ground. Her hair was tangled. Her blouse buttoned wrong. And her shoelaces untied. I watched her like I'd never seen her before. My baby sister. My shadow. She always talked. Always asked questions. Always clung to my hand like it was her anchor to the world. That night, she didn't speak at all. Just sat on her bed. Knees to chest. Rocking like a boat in a storm. I lay beside her. Silent. And when I reached for her hand, she didn't pull away, but she didn't squeeze back either. I knew. I didn't need to ask. I didn't need her to say it. Because I'd lived it. And in her eyes, I saw something I recognized, the look of a child who has just learned what the world is really like. A look no child should ever have. We didn't talk about it. Not that night. Not ever. Really? But something unspoken passed between us, a terrible understanding that no one else could carry. From that day on, we created a kind of code. A system. 3 knocks on the wall meant is he with you? 1 knock back, yes. 2, no. If either of us was alone with him too long, The other would find a reason to enter the room. We watched Sarah like hawks. Never let her out of our sight. We took turns bathing her, brushing her hair, putting her to sleep. We made it our mission not just to survive, but to keep her untouched. We were children playing grown-ups in a house that belonged to a monster, but in the cracks of that horror, Betty and I built a quiet, desperate kind of courage. Not for ourselves, but for her, our sunshine. If you've made it this far, thank you for staying. Sometimes, just listening is an act of love. I wonder, where are you hearing this from? What are you feeling right now? If you feel like sharing, leave me a little note in the comments. Let me know you're out there. And if stories like this matter to you, go ahead and stay close to Tenacity Tales. It's not just a place for pain. It's where we make room for truth. Together, we didn't talk about running away right away. For a long time, surviving was enough. Day by day, hour by hour, we kept Sarah close. Shielded her from him. Took turns sleeping light, ready to jump up at the slightest creak in the hallway. There were good days. Or, at least, days when nothing bad happened. Days when we could laugh a little. When Sarah would sing, and Betty would make paper dolls from newspaper scraps. And I could pretend for a few minutes that we weren't living inside a slow-moving nightmare. But then the night terrors started. Betty would wake up screaming, sweat soaking through her nightgown. Sometimes she clawed at her own arms, as if trying to peel off a memory. I'd hold her, rock her like Mama never did, whisper nonsense into her hair until she quieted again. We knew we couldn't live like that forever. So one afternoon, while hanging laundry under the burning Georgia sun, we made a plan. A real one. Not just the make-believe kind we used to whisper in bed. We'd go to Aunt Laverne's in South Carolina. She lived alone. I'd no husband. No children. Just cats and stories and a porch swing. Mama never liked her, said she was too wild. But we loved her. We'd take the back road through the woods, pack some clothes, a few cans of beans, and the $10 Betty had hidden in a coffee tin. We'd leave just before dawn. While he was still snoring, leave a note if we had to. We spent weeks planning. We rehearsed it like a play. Who would carry what? Where we'd stop to rest? How we'd keep Sarah from crying. The night before we were supposed to leave, I barely slept. Heart pounding, hands shaking. We were going to do it. We were really going to leave. But morning came, and so did he. He was supposed to be asleep. But something, maybe a sixth sense, maybe just bad luck, woke him early. He stood at the end of the hallway, blocking the door, arms crossed, eyes hard. Where you girls think you're going? His voice was low. Dangerous. Betty froze. Sarah started crying. I stepped forward, shielded them like always. He didn't yell, didn't hit. Just took the bag from my hand, emptied it onto the floor, stepped on our cans, crushed the compass Betty stole from school, and said, "There's no out for girls like you. You belong here." To me. And just like that, our whole world shrank again. Somewhere between 13 and 14, I stopped being a girl. I mean, I still looked like one. But inside, something had hardened. I no longer cried when he came into the room. I watched, listened, learned. He still ran the store. But I was the one keeping the books now. He was too proud to admit he didn't understand half the numbers he scribbled. So he let me do it. Said I was useful. That's how I met Mr. Tibbs, an old black man who worked in the back room, checking deliveries. He used to be an accountant in Atlanta before Jim Crow laws pushed him out. Now he sorted sacks of flour and smiled like he knew things no one else did. He saw me watching one day, curious. "Want to know how to read numbers like they talk?" he asked. I nodded. So he taught me. Quietly. Carefully. After hours, in between shelves of beans and pickles, he'd show me how ledgers really worked. Double entry, debits, credits, patterns that told the truth when people lied. He made it fun, like a secret language, and I learned fast, faster than he expected. Smart girl, he'd mumble, eyes kind but tired. Too smart for this town. By 15, I knew enough to notice when things didn't add up. Receipts missing, cash off by a few dollars, then a few hundred. And I realized Daddy wasn't just a monster. He was also a thief. He'd been stealing from the church fund, padding invoice, using the shop's profits to pay off debts that kept growing. That's when I saw the name Johnny Marks. It was scrawled in the corner of a torn receipt. I asked Mr. Tibbs softly. His face changed. He closed the ledger, leaned in. "Girl," he said, "you keep your nose away from that one. Johnny Marks ain't just a name. He's a warning." After Mr. Tibbs warned me, I couldn't stop thinking about that name. Johnny Marks. It didn't sound like much at first. Almost silly. Even. But the way Mr. Tibbs said it, Kiet. Eyes darting to the corners of the room made it stick like a thorn under my skin. So I started asking around. Carefully. Not directly. Never directly. Just listening. Picking up dropped words. Unfinished stories. In Millbrook, people didn't talk about Johnny Marks. Not really. They paused when the name came up, lowered their voices, changed the subject. I heard whispers. That he ran the numbers racket out of Macon. That he had men, boys. Really who'd do anything for him. That if you owed him and didn't pay, you vanished. That word vanished. It hung in the air like smoke. Like the smell of something burning far away. One night, I was closing the register when a stranger came in. Tall, clean, dark coat, even though it was hot out. He bought nothing, just walked slow, looked around, paused by the back wall where we kept the bourbon behind the counter. Then he asked, "Walter around I lead?" Said he wasn't. The man smiled. Polite, but too polite. Like a wolf pretending to be a preacher. Left without a word more. Later, I found Daddy pacing behind the store. Chain smoking. Face pale. Muttering to himself. Didn't even notice me. That night, he drank more than usual. Locked himself in the office. And for the first time, I saw something I never thought I'd see in him: fear. Real fear. And that's when it clicked. Johnny Marks wasn't just a loan shark. He was something else entirely. He was the kind of man other monsters ran from. And suddenly a part of me started thinking, what if I could use that? He never said it. He didn't have to. I knew the signs. The silence. The way the hallway creaked outside her room when it shouldn't. The way his voice got sweeter when he called her name. Too sweet. Like syrup trying to cover poison. Sarah was only 9. Still slept with her teddy bear. Still believed that Daddy could fix anything. One night, I woke to the sound of floorboards groaning. Slow. Deliberate. I sat up in the dark. Held my breath. Waited. And then the creak outside her door. I was out of bed before I could think. Barefoot. Heart slamming. And there he was. Standing. Just standing. Right outside Sarah's room. Hand on the doorknob. Eyes, not blank. Not drunk, but hungry. That same look. The one I knew too well. I didn't scream. Didn't cry. Just stepped between him and the door. Stared right into his face. He looked surprised. Then annoyed. Then something darker. "You watch yourself. Girl," he hissed. "I brought you into this world. I can take you out of it." I didn't flinch. Didn't move. Just said, "Touch her and I'll kill you myself." He stood there for a long time, long enough for the silence to crawl. Then he lowered his hand, turned, walked away. But from that moment, I knew there would be no more time, no more waiting, no more hoping for help. This wasn't about me anymore. It was about her. And I had to end it before he started again. I didn't plan it out of rage. Not really. Anger burns too fast. What I needed was something slower, colder, permanent. I didn't want to hurt him. I wanted him gone. Forever. I started with what I already had knowledge. I knew his debts. I knew the forged invoices, the fake ledgers, the missing receipts and the padded inventory. And I knew about Johnny Marks. That was the seed. Because monsters like Daddy, they rot the world quietly. But men like Johnny, they clean up their messes violently. So I built my plan in silence. Late at night, while the house slept, I sat at the kitchen table with my notebook open, recreating every falsified entry he'd made over the last year. Mr. Tibbs had taught me well. I copied his handwriting, matched the paper type, stamped dates with an old inkwell I found in the attic. Every forged invoice looked real. Too real. Then came the ledger. A second, secret one. The kind Daddy should have kept, but didn't. I filled it with everything. Every theft. Every manipulated number. Every cent he owed. And I made sure it pointed to Johnny. I even wrote a letter. Anonymous. Typed on Mr. Gerald's old typewriter at the store after hours. No signature. Just one line, he's skimming from you. Open the books. I didn't mail it right away. I waited. Waited until the next time I saw him outside Sarah's door. Until I saw the way his shadow stretched across her wall like a curse. Until I felt the bile rise in my throat from fear. From fury. From the knowing. Then I mailed it. Dropped the envelope into the red mailbox outside the post office. Hands steady. Heart silent. I didn't do it for revenge. I did it for Sarah. Because sometimes, you don't need a gun. Or a knife. You just need a truth sharp enough to kill. It took me 3 weeks. 3 weeks of stolen hours. Hidden notebooks. And breath held so long I thought I'd pass out. This wasn't just paperwork. It was war. A war I had to win without guns or fists, just ink. Timing. And silence. I started with the books. The fake ledger needed to feel realer than the real one. So I aged the pages, rubbed them with tea bags, crinkled corners, spilled just enough ink to make it messy. Human. Then I replicated receipts. Typed. Folded. Stamped. Each one connected to vendors that didn't exist. Products never sold. Amounts exaggerated to just the right degree. I even created a fake audit letter as if someone else had noticed the errors before me. A draft. Unsigned. Half crumpled. Left tucked between pages, like it had been forgotten on purpose. And the names I made sure they pointed to Johnny Marks. Payments that didn't match. Withdrawals, labeled personal. Loans taken in cash with no collateral. A picture was forming. A damning one. And I didn't stop there. I planted copies. One in Daddy's safe behind the liquor shelf. Another inside the floorboard under his desk. Then the final A-sealed envelope with all the pieces labeled for Mr. J. M. I placed it inside the delivery bin behind the store, where Johnny's boys usually picked up payments. It was all too perfect. Almost too clean. So I smudged my fingerprints across the ledger, tore a corner of a receipt, left just enough chaos to make it believable. Then I waited. Every night I lay in bed wondering, will he find it? Will he believe it? Will he do what I can't? And when doubt crept in, when fear whispered that maybe I'd made a terrible mistake, I looked at Sarah, sleeping with her arms curled around that bear. And I remembered, this was not about justice. This was survival. It started like any other night. Dinner was beans and cornbread. The radio played soft gospel in the background. Daddy sat in his usual chair, feet up, whiskey glass in hand, muttering about gas prices and bad crops. I served the food like always. Didn't look him in the eye. Didn't need to. He'd been tense all week, short-tempered, snapping at customers, chain-smoking behind the store. And that night he was quieter than usual. Too quiet. Around 8 p.m. The bell above the store door rang. Not many folks came by that late. Betty looked up. Sarah held her bear tighter. I walked out from the kitchen. There he was. Tall, clean-shaven, dark suit. Same man I'd seen before, the one who didn't buy anything. He didn't ask for Daddy. He just stood at the counter. Waited. I went back to the dining room. Told Daddy, "There's someone asking for you." His eyes met mine. And for a second, just one flicker, he knew. He stood up slow, finished the whiskey in one gulp, straightened his collar, didn't say a word. Just walked out. Betty followed me to the window. We watched as they stood near the loading dock, barely visible under the hanging bulb. They talked, or rather, he talked. Daddy mostly listened, nodded, then shook his head, then raised his voice just once. The man didn't flinch. He simply stepped closer, placed a hand on Daddy's shoulder, and just like that, Daddy stopped talking. The man left. Daddy didn't come back. We waited. 10 minutes. 20. An hour. Still nothing. The next morning, I found him in the storage room, slumped against a stack of flour sacks. Eyes open, but gone. No marks. No bruises. No signs of struggle. Just stillness, as if the air had pressed too hard on his chest, and he forgot how to breathe. The coroner said heart gave out, but I knew better. That wasn't a heart attack. That was a message. And the town, oh, they whispered. They speculated. They said stress, debt, bad luck. But I knew the truth. The monster was dead, and I was the one who set it loose. I thought I'd feel something. Relief, joy, anything. But the truth, it was quiet. Too quiet. The morning after they took his body, I sat at the kitchen table, hands around a cold coffee mug I hadn't touched. The house felt different. Lighter. Maybe. But not better. Not yet. Zara didn't understand. She just knew Daddy was gone. Betty asked me once, did he die because of the money, and I said, I think he died because he was meant to. But that night, lying awake, I whispered the real question into the dark. Did I kill him not with my hands? Not with a weapon, but with a letter. Ali. A trap. Was that murder I imagined? A courtroom? A judge? A jury? Would they see a killer? Or a girl who did what she had to? I didn't have answers. All I knew was this. For the first time in years, the hallway outside my room was just a hallway. The creaks on the floor didn't make my heart race. The night didn't breathe down my neck. And in that space of stillness, in that strange calm, I allowed myself one fragile thought. We might be okay now. Not healed. Not whole. But safe. And maybe that was enough. Packing up the house didn't feel real. Not at first. Each drawer, each dusty shelf, held pieces of a life we hadn't chosen. A photograph of Mama half smiling. A ribbon from Sarah's second birthday. Receipts. Grocery lists. A broken belt buckle. I kept the photo. Burned the rest. I sold the store. Didn't even haggle the price. Some cousin of Daddy's took it over, someone with slicked back hair and hands too smooth to have earned anything. Didn't matter. I cashed the life insurance quietly. Didn't cry when I signed the papers. Didn't feel much at all. We packed what we had into 2 battered suitcases. Sarah carried her bear. Betty carried her Bible, and I carried the rest. We didn't say goodbye to anyone. Who was there to say it to? The town hadn't protected us, hadn't seen us. Or maybe they had, and chose silence. The train to Atlanta came at 6:17 as c.a.m. It was still dark. The platform was nearly empty. Sarah fell asleep, leaning on my arm. Betty looked out the window, like she was trying to memorize the trees. And me, I didn't look back. I let Millbrook fall away behind us like a shed skin. That old life was over. Done. But I wasn't naive. I knew freedom wasn't magic. It didn't erase nightmares. Didn't pay bills. Didn't fix broken things. It was just this, a chance. A quiet, trembling chance to begin again. And I would take it. With both hands. I thought surviving him would be the hard part. It wasn't. Turns out, the world doesn't like girls who don't stay broken. 2 weeks after we arrived in Atlanta, a woman from the Department of Child Welfare showed up at our door. She wore a tight bun and thin patience. She asked questions with a clipboard and didn't smile when Sarah offered her a drawing. She looked at me and said, "You're 16. You can't be a legal guardian." I said, "I've been their guardian since I was 10. Didn't matter. They wanted to separate us. Send Betty to a foster home for teens. Sarah to a different one for little girls. Me, I could go to a shelter. Or back to Millbrook." I laughed. Right there in her face. Not because it was funny, because it was absurd. I had survived the devil in his own house. And now they wanted to take away the only good thing I'd saved. So I fought. Every day. I found a legal aid office down the street. Told them everything, not the full story. But enough? I brought documents. Proof I'd handled money. Paid rent. Kept the girls in school. I begged teachers to write letters. Asked our landlord to testify. And slowly, very slowly, the system began to see me not as a girl pretending to be an adult, but as a sister refusing to let her family be torn apart again. The hearing took 3 hours. The judge was stern. His robe too big. His eyes too tired. But at the end, he cleared his throat and said, "Against our better judgment, we grant temporary guardianship to Miss Eleanor Johnson." That night, I cried for the first time in years. Not out of pain, not from fear, but because for once, I had won something that mattered. It wasn't much. 2 rooms, peeling wallpaper, a sink that dripped all night, but it was ours. A landlord on the south side gave us a break half rent for the first 3 months after I told him I could do his books for free. That's how it started. Balancing ledgers for little shops. Bodegas. Laundromats. While Sarah colored at my feet and Betty read her Bible out loud from the couch. At night, when the girls were asleep, I'd pull out my textbooks. Accounting. Algebra. Things no one thought a girl like me could learn. But I did. Slowly. Stubbornly. I'd sleep maybe 4 hours. Sometimes 3. But every time I opened my eyes, there was no shadow at the door. No smell of alcohol. No sound of boots on wood floor. Just quiet. Just the soft sound of 2 girls breathing safely in their sleep. We didn't have much, but we had food. We had walls. We had peace. I remember one morning, sunlight slanting through the window, dust dancing in the air. Sarah laughed in her sleep. Not cried, not whimpered, laughed. And I stood in the kitchen with tears in my eyes, thinking, this is what freedom sounds like. Sweetheart, if you've listened this far, maybe your heart is walking alongside mine. I tell these stories not to teach, but to offer a place quiet enough for someone like you to feel seen. Where are you listening from tonight? A small room, a sleepless hour. If something in this story touched a part of your own, would you leave me a line? Just one. Because Tenacity Tales isn't just a place to tell stories. It's a place where survivors quietly say, "Me too." And if you'd like to stay with me on this journey, a simple little subscription is more than enough. I'll be right here, waiting to tell you the next part, when Ellie finally learns what it means to be loved without fear. He was quiet. That's the first thing I noticed. Not shy. Just gentle. Mr. Thomas Holloway taught evening classes at the community center. Math. Writing. GED prep. I signed up because I needed the certificate. I stayed because of the way he looked at me like I wasn't broken. He never touched me. Not even a handshake. Just nodded when I entered the room. Said my name. The way no one else ever did, not like Ellie the orphan. Not like Miss Johnson. But like Ellie, the girl I had buried. He waited. Never pushed. Never priet. Just asked me one night, after class, when I was packing up papers, "What's your favorite book?" Not what happened to you. Not where's your family. Just a small question. Like an open door with sunlight on the floor. That's how it began. We talked about books, then music, then dreams. He told me his sister had raised him. That kindness was something you practiced, not inherited. We didn't fall in love fast. We built it, one slow brick at a time. He didn't try to fix me. He just stayed, patient, present. Sometimes, I'd flinch when he moved too quickly. He'd pause, wait, give me space. And over time, something softened. The part of me that had curled up tight for years began to breathe again. And one night, when Sarah had fallen asleep and Betty was at Bible study, he knocked on our door with a bag of groceries and two hands that never reached until I reached first. I let him in. That night, we didn't kiss. We didn't even touch. We sat on the floor, drank cheap tea, and talked until morning. And that's when I knew this wasn't survival anymore. This was love. The day I got my acceptance letter, I didn't cry. I just sat on the floor, the envelope still in my hand, and let the silence wrap around me. College. Not just a class or certificate, but college. 4 years. Books. Campuses. Professors. A place where no one would ask what my father did, or why I flinched when doors slammed. I was 21. Older than most of the freshmen. I had 2 jobs. A crowded bus commute, and barely enough for books. But I had something they didn't, a reason. Every lecture I sat through, I thought of Sarah's little hands, of Betty praying out loud in the next room, of Mama's soft voice saying, "Don't let them take your mind too." So I didn't. I studied. I stayed up late. I aced every test. I wrote papers with shaking fingers and a pounding heart, but I wrote them. And 4 years later, on a spring morning that smelled like honeysuckle, I walked across a stage in a borrowed gown and received a piece of paper that proved the world wrong. I was now Miss Eleanor Johnson, teacher, and when I stood in front of my first classroom, chalk in hand, heart steady, I told those children the truth. I wasn't supposed to be here, but here I am, and so are you. So let's begin. It started with just one girl, 14, quiet, eyes that had seen too much, mouth that barely opened. Her aunt asked if I could tutor her in English, said she was behind, said she was troubled. But when I sat with her, I saw something else, a child whose voice had been taken, not by failure, but by fear. So I taught her grammar, and how to read a poem out loud, and how to look someone in the eye. And then others came. A cousin, a neighbor, a girl from church. They sat on my floor with school books and broken hearts. And I did more than teach. I listened. That's how New Dawn began. Not with a ribbon cutting, but with whispers, with tear-stained notebooks, with girls who had never been told you matter. I gave them tea, and safety, and lessons. I let them fail. And try again. And cry. I wasn't their savior. I was their witness. I couldn't fix what happened to them. But I could offer one thing, a room with no monsters. Over time, the room grew. The floors were mopped. The walls painted. Volunteers came. Then funding. But the heart stayed the same. A small place where pain didn't mean shame. Where girls could rewrite the story they were told. Where survival could slowly, gently, become living. I never planned to become a mother. Not really. Teaching was already more than I ever dreamed. Watching broken girls lift their heads again, that was enough. But then came Mia. 7 years old. Bye guys. Silent. Her caseworker called me at 10 p.m. Just for one night. They said, she has nowhere else to go. One night became a week. A week became forever. Mia never asked questions. Just followed me everywhere. Slept curled like a kitten at the foot of my bed. One morning, she slipped her small hand into mine and whispered, "Can I stay here if I'm quiet?" I didn't have the words. Just nodded. After her came Danny. Then Rue. Then 3 sisters with matching scars on their backs. Some came from foster care. Some straight from hospital rooms. Some didn't speak for weeks. Some wouldn't let anyone touch them. And slowly, they began to call the center home. They called each other sister. They asked me what was for dinner. They left crayon drawings on my desk that said, "Thank you for not giving up on me." And one by one they asked, "Can I call you Mama the first time?" I almost said no, because I didn't feel like I had the right. But then I looked at her, a girl with a shaking voice and a soul stitched together with hope, and I realized it was never about the right. It was about presence. It was about staying, about holding their pain and not turning away. So I opened my arms, and my life stretched wider than I ever imagined. And just like that, my heart grew crowded with daughters I never gave birth to. But they were mine. In every way that mattered. I used to worry about them. Even after we found safety. Even after the quiet. Sarah and Betty, they had lived in that house too. They had heard the same footsteps. Seen the same darkness. Trauma doesn't vanish just because the door locks now. It lingers. It hides in silence. It waits. But the beautiful thing about healing is this: it doesn't always look like triumph. Sometimes it just looks like continuing. Betty found her way through faith. She joined a small ministry that worked with at-risk kids. Became a nun, but not the quiet, cloistered kind. The fierce kind. The kind who held a crying girl and whispered, "I know. I survived too." She wrote letters to me often. Told me she still prayed for Daddy. Not because he deserved it, but because she did. Sarah became a teacher just like me. But for younger kids. She said she wanted to be the first safe adult some children ever met. Her classroom was always full of colors. Stories. Gigless. She kept a photo of Mama on her desk. And one of all 3 of us before the worst of it. They didn't become famous. Didn't build empires. But they became something far more rare, whole. And in their quiet, gentle lives, they proved that surviving isn't the end of the story. It's the start of something braver. It had been 30 years. 3 decades since I left that street. That store. That town, with its silent porches and nosy windows. Millbrook hadn't changed much. The bakery still smelled like burnt sugar. The church bell still rang at noon. The sidewalks still cracked in the same places. But I had changed. I wasn't the girl with shaking hands anymore. I walked taller, surer, with gray streaks in my hair and no apology in my voice. I came back because a teacher at the old school invited me to speak. About resilience, she said. About how far you've come. But when I stepped into that auditorium, something in me twisted. Because I remembered. I remembered which pew I sat on while bruised, which hallway I avoided, which eyes looked away when they knew. After the talk, some people clapped, some avoided my gaze, and some came to me, slowly, like ghosts stepping into light. They said, "We always wondered. I thought something wasn't right. I should have said something." They didn't say sorry. Most didn't even hug me. But their voices trembled. And I realized it wasn't just me carrying the shame. It was the whole town. Their silence, their complicity, their knowing. Millbrook hadn't buried him. It had buried us. And now, standing on its soil again, he didn't feel anger. I felt pity. For the ones who looked away and kept looking away. Even now. It started with a letter, handwritten. No return address. Just 2 words on the front, "I know." Inside was a name I hadn't heard since childhood. A girl from church. Kiet. Always dressed perfectly. She wrote, "He did it to me too." But I thought maybe I was the only one. Then came another. And another. Emails. Phone calls. Whispers in the hallway after my talk. A woman who used to babysit me. An old neighbor. One of my Sunday school teachers. All of them said the same thing. I thought I was alone. Some never told anyone. Some had tried, but weren't believed. Some had buried it so deep they forgot until they saw me standing there alive. I didn't feel stronger. I felt smaller. Like the pain was stretching out beyond what I could hold. But I also felt less lonely. It wasn't just my father's sickness. It was a silence the town had built around him, a cocoon of respectability. Of Untill. And when I broke it open, others stepped through the cracks. We didn't gather in anger. We gathered in recognition. Each woman carried her own weight, her own version, her own ache, but we looked each other in the eye and said, softly, "Me too." And suddenly, what once felt like a life sentence started to feel like a bond. A quiet, steady resistance. Telling the story wasn't enough. Not anymore. I had spoken, survived, built, loved, but I kept thinking about the girls who didn't have a teacher like me, a sister like I had been, a second chance. So I decided if the world wouldn't offer safety, I'd carve it out with my own hands. I started speaking, not just at schools, but at police departments, courthouses, churches. I told them what predators look like, not monsters, but men with charming smiles and neighbors who say he'd never. I told them how silence kills more surely than fists, how shame grows in the dark like mold. I showed them how to listen to the girl who hesitates, to the boy who suddenly goes quiet, to the child who flinches at love. I trained teachers, worked with therapists, helped set up shelters. I turned New Dawn into more than a center. It became a network, a movement, a quiet revolution for girls who never got to scream. I didn't do it to be a hero. I did it because the day I stopped hiding, I became free. And I wanted that freedom for every girl who ever thought no one will believe me. Because now someone would. Because now I was here. We never set out to grow big. New Dawn was just a room. A safe place with tea and pencils and quiet. But pain is common. So healing must be made available. And the room grew. We got a second location. Then a third. Then a building funded by a grant I never dared apply for, but someone else did. On our behalf. We trained volunteers. Therapists. Lovers. Teachers. We created curriculum for schools. Workshops for parents. Hotlines for kids who didn't know how to say the words out loud. There were days I sat at my desk and opened a letter from a girl in Oregon, or a woman in Alabama, or a foster home in Kansas, and they all started the same. I didn't think anyone would understand. But then I found you. New Dawn didn't save them. They saved themselves. We just held the light long enough for them to see their own way out. One summer, we were invited to speak at a national conference. And a woman I didn't know, called me a national voice. I smiled. But inside I thought, no, I'm not a voice. I'm an echo of every girl who couldn't speak, of every child who only had silence. And if that echo helps someone else finally say, me too, then it's enough. It's more than enough. Sometimes, I still wake up afraid. Not of him. Not anymore. But of how much time I lost to fear. There are days I walk past a mirror and catch a glimpse of a girl I used to be, fragile, tense, silent. And other days, I see someone I don't recognize at all, shoulders square, eyes clear, voice steady. Healing isn't clean. It's not a straight line. There are nights when the past knocks softly, and I let it in. Not to hurt me, just to sit beside me and remind me where I came from. The scars never disappeared. Not the ones on my body, not the ones deeper, but they faded. They softened. They stopped bleeding. They stopped speaking for me. I used to think survival meant forgetting. That in order to move on, I had to erase every trace of what happened. But now I know healing isn't about erasure. It's about ownership. Those scars, they're mine. And no one gets to rewrite them but me. They are not shame. They are not weakness. They are evidence. Evidence that I was there. That I lived. That I chose again and again to stay. And now, when I see those marks, I don't flinch. I nod, like greeting an old companion, because we made it. Because we're still here. No one ever asked. Not really. Some whispered. Some speculated. But no one looked me in the eye and said, "Did you do it?" And I never offered it. Until now? Yes, I did. Not with my hands. Not with poison or gun or rope, but with knowledge. With strategy. With choice. I fed him to the man he owed. I lit the fire and walked away. And when it was over, I tucked my sisters into bed and let the silence do the rest. I didn't weep. I didn't rejoice either. What I felt was release. Not freedom, not yet, but space. Room to breathe. Room to begin. I was 16, and I was tired of waiting for someone else to save us. He died, and we lived. That's the simplest truth I have. There are those who will call it murder. Others, justice. But for me, it was self-rescue, and I don't regret it. Not because I hated him, but because I chose us. I chose to stop the cycle, to draw the line, to say, this ends with me. If you're listening to this, and your chest feels tight, and your hands are cold, and something inside you whispers, this sounds like me, I want you to know, you are not wrong. You are not crazy. You are not alone. Whatever happened to you was real. Even if no one believed you, even if no one saw, even if you can't find the words yet, it still matters. You still matter. I don't need to know your name to believe you. I don't need the details to see your pain. But I do need one thing. I need you to know you don't have to carry it forever. There is light. There are people. There are places where your voice won't echo back empty. Tell someone. Tell anyone. Whisper it if you have to. But speak. Because silence protected him. And silence nearly killed me. You deserve more than survival. You deserve peace. You deserve mornings without fear. Laughter without guilt. Love without flinching. So if your story still lives inside your ribs like a locked room, please, open the door. Someone is waiting on the other side. We are waiting. If this story touched something in you, even just a flicker, leave a comment. Tell me where you're listening from. What you're feeling. Let me know you're still here. And if you want more stories like this, real ones, quiet but true, stay with Tenacity Tales. Just one little subscribe, and I promise, our paths will cross again.